şişe falan. Sahneyi temizledim de önce. Herkesin keyfi yerinde mi? Herkes
Well, is everyone well? Are you enjoying yourselves? One person is uploading. No, it's not that I wanted a hand, but I just want to hear something, kind of. So you're wonderful, you're great. You had your coffees. So today is better, right? Okay, great. Now let's move on with the same pace. Our next speaker is coming from the Silicon Valley, and he's a young entrepreneur. He's the Vice General Manager of SimilarWeb, Ankit Jain, and we will be listening to a detailed analysis which will be about contextualizing the mobile and life cycles for industries. The floor is yours, Ankit Jain.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Ankit Jain, and I'm the Vice President of Special Projects at SimilarWeb. Today, I'm very excited to be here and share two parts of my life that I'm very excited with you. Mobile analytics, and how to look at mobile analytics in the context of your competition and your industry. I've spent the last decade of my career examining and taking advantage of data in different domains. I started at Cool, a web search startup, where we were building arguably the world's biggest search index with 125 billion web pages. Our goal was to bring the world's best web pages, even from the depths of the internet, to consumers, which was hard to find on other search engines at the time. Cool was acquired by Google, where I led search, discovery, storage, and infrastructure for Google Play, bringing the experience that most of you are familiar with to over 1 billion users. In 2013, I left Google to start Quetra, a mobile intelligence startup that brought mobile engagement data from over 250 million mobile devices to investors, developers, and marketers around the world. Last year, Quetra was acquired by SimilarWeb so that this digital panel of data could be integrated into its competitive analytics platform. So what is SimilarWeb? SimilarWeb is the market intelligence company of the digital world. Through our free and enterprise products, we enable anybody to look at competitive analytics for every website, every app, in every country. Agencies and marketers use SimilarWeb to look at their competitors' marketing strategies. Business development professionals use it to discover potential synergies. And lastly, analysts use it to benchmark digital company performance. And of course, some of the world's top brands are using SimilarWeb today. Airbnb and United are two of our travel and airline partners. eBay, PayPal, Flipkart, Staples are on the e-commerce side, Bain Capital, BCG, KKR on the investing, finance, and research side, and of course some of these names like Google, Yandex, or Samsung on the internet and telecom side. So why do all of these companies use SimilarWeb? They use it to complement their in-house analytics. Now, I'm sure all of you in your businesses use analytics, whether it's product analytics, marketing analytics, or sales analytics. We all use this so we can benchmark our internal performance. We've all been trained to look at analytics with these beautiful up and to the right curves. Because to us, success is when things go up and to the right. But what if I was to tell you others can also be going up and to the right? What if everybody is going up and to the right? Are you still successful? Absolutely. But what if we were to step back, and this is the idea that I'd like each and every one of you to take away from today's talk, is to redefine success not only to be up and to the right, but to be up and to the right at a rate faster than your competition, your industry, and your category. Because then you are growing faster than the market. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to delve into the world of mobile analytics from the context of the user. Our user journey is going to start from when a user first hears about an app and go all the way to when they potentially uninstall it. We're going to talk about what's important to connect all these dots and to build your brand in this mobile world. So let's get started. Most of us have seen mobile ads, and we see them everywhere we go, whether it's Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, or any mobile property. Today, they're filled with mobile ads. But mobile ads are not all made equal. Here's some data from manage.com, which shows in the US the difference in mobile ad numbers and the cost on a per 1,000 impression basis across categories. For games, you can see it being almost over $1.50 for 1,000 impressions, while for news apps, it's less than a third of that. So it's important that you look at your category, you look at your performance in the context of your category, and make sure you are performing well. You're not overpaying, hopefully you're underpaying. But optimizing for mobile ad spend and getting ROI doesn't end with optimizing your ad strategy. It can actually continue deep into your app. And the most popular way of doing this is using deep links. Let's look at a story from this app called Hotel Tonight, where I think they beautifully connected their ad story, their brand ad story, with their app story. If you go to Google and you search for something like Hotel Tonight in Seattle or any city or country, you're going to see a lot of search results. But you'll also see some advertising on there, some search ads. And one of these ads is going to be Hotel Tonight, and it's going to drive you to try and install their application. If you click on it, you'll go to the App Store, which will tell you, install this app. If you install the app, this is where the magic happens. Normally, when we open an app, we see a page which says, create an account. We see a page which says, what's your name? What's your email address? It asks a lot of questions. It really doesn't tell you what you want. In this case, what I think Hotel Tonight has done beautifully is they took the context of what you were doing before you installed the app, what you were doing in the search results page, which is Hotels Tonight in Seattle, and gave that to you immediately. They didn't make you make an account. They showed you Hotels Tonight in Seattle. That's magical for a user. They really put the user first. And the results talk to this. This reduced their cost per install by 16%. And more importantly, perhaps, is that it increased their install to booking ratio. For a hotel booking site, the most important thing is how many nights are booked. So how did it do this? Well, it did two things. One, because they were bidding on very specific keywords, Hotel Tonight in Seattle, not hotels, not Seattle, but Hotel Tonights in Seattle, and they do this around the world, they were able to have fewer bidders that were competing with them, so they could get a lower effective cost per install. But then they also, on the other side, had a higher ROI, because more people that came in with a very clear intent went through and made a booking, rather than just install an app for potential future use. They're not the only ones that use deep links. A lot of people do. It's most popular in the shopping, music, and lifestyle categories. And this makes sense, because these categories have large catalogs of items, whether it's songs or products. That's what shopping, music, and lifestyle are all about. And this is obvious through this data, which says the most popular use of your deep links is pointing to direct elements in your catalog. Now, what's interesting is this doesn't just have to be for search ads. This doesn't just have to be for app installs. Let's say users have installed your app, but they're not using it as much as you want them to. A very popular way of using deep links is to use them in re-engagement ads. Let's say you're Spotify, and a user has Spotify but isn't using it, but you've learned that this user likes Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber or any other artist. Well, on Facebook, you can advertise and say latest Justin Bieber song or latest Taylor Swift song, and when they click on that ad, it takes you deep within Spotify to the album or the song that you were advertising for. So now that we've talked about acquiring users, how to bring them in through ads and give them this magical first experience, let's talk about personalization. It's a topic that I think is not talked about nearly as much as it should be. Personalization helps you build a relationship directly with the user. It's your brand with the user. We're going to look at Wanilo, a popular shopping app in the US and some other parts of the world, and what they did for home screen personalization. It's a story that I think will resonate with many of you because it's a problem that many of us face together. In their app, they've got hundreds of thousands of items in their catalog. So what do they put in the home screen when a user comes in for the first time? Well, a few years ago, in the first version of their app, they put the items that the user had previously browsed or items that they had saved. This had two major problems. First, for users that didn't use the app much, it wasn't very interesting because there wasn't much to show. And more importantly, Wanilo has hundreds of thousands of apps and hundreds of thousands of items in their app. So they want to help users discover new items and interact with them. And this home screen really didn't enable that discovery. So what they did in the next version is they said, well, let's build a curation team, a merchandising team that will make lists of content, lists of items, and update them on a weekly basis. And as the app grew, they did this on a geographic basis. So a different list for the US, a different one for Korea, a different one for Japan, a different one per country. And that works, but it doesn't take the user into account. It doesn't take what the user did in the Wanilo app into account. So after many tests, what they found is the best combination of these two, what they call their magic feed, performs the best. This magic feed takes the algorithmically generated content, the items that are based on what you've seen in the past, what you've saved in the past, and things related to that, and combines it with the merchandise content. So you get a balance of algorithmic content based on the user once they start using the app more with the merchandise content. So this way, the merchandising team can do promotions. They can bring in content that otherwise this user would not have discovered. It also works really well because a new user still sees a full feed based on the merchandising results, but a user that uses the app a lot sees a very personalized feed. So it helps balance all different use cases. And their results were pretty impressive as well. At a very basic level, it increased the amount of time spent in the app. But more importantly, it increased the amount of saves by 27%, the interactions that users were doing with their products inside the app. So it showed that users are happier, they're finding more things, which is exactly the goal of this app. Now, personalization doesn't have to end within the app. We can take this beyond the app. As I said earlier, a lot of apps get users, and then they stop using the app. Turns out almost 80% of an app's users will stop using it within the first 3 days. Just think about that. 80% of the users that you acquire will leave your app in the first 3 days. So it's important to bring them back into your app. And one of the best ways you can do this is using push notifications. So we're going to talk about Haptic. It's an Indian customer service app that helps users ask questions about any brand in India. What Quetra did with Haptic is they understood every individual user. In this case, the user is a parent. We understand based on prior interactions with the user that their persona is one of a parent and that they have a lot of brand affinities. One of them is Flipkart. So the push notification, instead of being, hey, get back to Flipkart and buy something, or 20% off on Flipkart, it's very specific. It says, get the season's best toys on Flipkart. So it takes into account that the user is a parent. It takes into account the fact that the user is interested in Flipkart. And the results were phenomenal. What Haptic saw was almost doubling of the open rates of their notifications. That's almost 2 times the users that thought that this was an interesting notification. In a world where most of us get annoyed by notifications that aren't personal to us, where your app's brand can be one of being spammy versus one of being enticing, one of bringing people back into your app, it's very important to understand the user and talk to them in the way they would like to be talked to. So the content of your notification is extremely important. But that's not all. We can take this a step further. When should you send the push notification to which user? So once you've increased your open rate because of content personalization, let's talk about time personalization. This is a concept most of us don't talk about too much when it comes in the notification world. We're going to talk about a game called Pixowl. Pixel is a game where the developer was seeing interesting open rates, but they weren't able to explain why some days of the week or some times of the day they were seeing really bad open rates, and other times of the day they were seeing great open rates. So what they did was they studied at first their users at large. They saw that there was, in North America during the weekdays, the best time to send a push notification was between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., which makes sense. It's a game, so people will play it after work or maybe before dinner, before they spend time with their kids, because that was the target audience of this game. But every user isn't equal. So they took it a step further. What they said is, let's look at users one by one, not as a human, but they have a machine that does this. It's actually this platform called LeanPlum, which studies users' behavior in the app. And it understands when users are most likely to use the app and sends a push notification slightly before it. Right? So in this example, the first user will send a notification right before midnight, before they went to bed, because they tended to play games on their phone before they went to bed. The other user, they sent it 8 hours later at 8 a.m. And the reason they did this is because this user tended to play the game when they're on their morning commute. Notice how neither one of these times is between 6 and 9 p.m. So how did this do? Well, at a high level, it increased open rates by 16%, but for a game, revenue is everything. It doesn't matter how much someone plays your game, it's how much money they make. So very importantly, it increased revenue by 17%. So why does this work? Now imagine yourself, you're in the middle of work, or maybe this Keynote, and a game developer sends you a push notification. Come back into my game, and let's play now. Well, if you get that, you're likely to dismiss the notification, because it's just not the right time to be playing a game. Once you dismiss the notification, it's never going to help push you back into the app. However, if for some reason the game developer knows that you have a break at lunchtime or after work, or you like to play games before you go to bed, and it sends you a notification right before then, you're less likely to dismiss the notification, which means it's more likely to be effective in driving you back into the app. So, to conclude my talk about push notifications, let's talk about some industry benchmarks so that you and your team can compare your performance to the category you belong in. The top category when it comes to push notification open rates is finance, with almost 8%. And this makes sense. People really care about their money. If someone's saying US stocks tumbling, go check it out, new president, there's volatility in the market, people are probably going to check it out. Photography apps, on the other hand, have a very low open rate, less than 1.5%. Most likely because users don't like to be told, take a photo now. It just doesn't make as much sense. And as we talk about push notifications, it's important to talk about Android versus iOS, because the systems are very different. Until the latest version of Android, when you install an app, all the permissions are bundled in one screen. You say yes or no to everything. So on Android, almost 80% of users are opted into push notifications. On iOS, you get one permission at a time. Would you like to let this app use your location? Would you like to let this app send you push notifications? So the rates of notification opt-in are lower, which means there's fewer users that you can actually send these messages to. So we've talked about how to get a user into your app, how to connect that ad story to your app story. Then we've talked about how to give them a wonderful experience every single time they come into your app. And if they stop coming to your app, how to send very personalized push notifications. So let's assume you've done all the work and you have a great app. How can you make sure that you're garnering the best reviews from the user, the best feedback from the user? Because as you think about your mobile brand today, it's often the public ratings and reviews that people leave for you on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. So let's talk about feedback. And we're going to talk about a healthcare app. It's a very different domain, but they have a mobile health coaching app that has a very interesting story. For the first 2 years of their existence, they had probably not so good an app. On average, they had a 1.5-star rating in the app stores with over 250 reviews, 260, 280 ratings. That's pretty bad. It means users really don't like the app. It's 1.5 out of 5 stars. So this is bad because prospective users are going to look at this and really question whether this app works. And also, the App Store is going to downrank this app because ratings and reviews are a very important signal in search and in the top list. And chances are, if you talk to your local representative for Apple or Google, they will not feature your app on the home screen of the Google Play Store or the App Store. So what did they do? They integrated this company Apptentive's user conversation platform that gauges the user's interest within the app itself. It's a very interesting idea. You ask the user, do you love my app? Okay? There's two options, yes and no. If the user clicks yes, you say, oh, thank you. Go to the App Store and please rate and review us. Okay? It's very simple. But what if the user says no? You don't send them to the App Store. You don't want them to leave a review for your app that is negative. But you still want their feedback because you want to learn what went wrong. You want to put the user first. You want their voice to be heard. And so what Apptentive enables is a survey system. You can ask them questions, or you can say, just leave us your feedback. So now you're getting the feedback back, but instead of it being public with your public brand, it's private. And it's something that your team can use to improve your application. So how did this work? Well, in the last year, since they've integrated it, the average rating has gone from 1.5 star to 4.5 stars. That's drastic. And this is probably one of the most drastic examples, but it shows what can happen if you just think about your user's journey within your application. And not only has their average rating gone up, the app has actually improved because now users are giving more detailed feedback. You can ask them targeted questions. Which part of our app did you not like? Not just app crashed. It's where did it crash? And you can have a conversation with your users. It's improving your application. And what Apptentive found across all of its customers is that a very large percentage of users that were shown these surveys actually answer them, which means users like giving the feedback, and all of these users that otherwise would have been negative reviews in the Play Store have now been redirected, or the App Store have now been redirected to be private feedback that can be actionable and not your public brand. Now, ratings and reviews are a very interesting world. As you look at this chart, the only thing I want to point out is the 1-star column and the 5-star column. Most users either love an app or hate an app. Those are the only two kinds of users that will actually share feedback. Someone who thinks it's okay will not do anything. They're not incentivized enough to go and make their voice heard. Entertainment is the most interesting one of these. It's the only category where the number of haters is more than the number of lovers. And we delve deeper into this to check why this is the case. It's not because the apps are necessarily bad. It's often because the content that the user is looking for is not there. There's not always the rights that the app developer has to all the content. So the last part about ratings and reviews is the fact that it's very hard to break into the world of an established app store. In the lifestyle category, apps have almost 90,000 reviews. So if you're a new app developer trying to establish your mobile brand, not only do you have to have a good app, not only do you have to have a high rating, but you have to have a lot of reviews. And so this is why it's so hard to establish yourself in the mobile world. So make sure your app is great, because that's one of the best steps you can take, and it's in your control to spread the word. So we've talked about a lot of things. I want to leave you with the last few minutes of pure key metrics in the mobile world, retention data, app usage data, so that after you've done all of these optimizations to your apps, you and your team can go and compare yourselves with these key metrics. These slides will be available online, so use this to benchmark your progress. We'll talk about retention first in the story of the day of a user. So the average user has over 100 apps installed on their phone. Okay, that's a lot of apps, but they're only using 13 of their apps on a daily basis. Okay. Out of those 13, 10 to 11 are used almost every day. It's the same staple set of apps that you use. And maybe 1 or 2 apps are different on a daily basis. Maybe a soccer app on the day there's a soccer game, or in the US, American football apps on Sundays. There's certain apps that have seasonality to them. But the majority of the apps that we use are exactly the same, over and over again. And a very interesting statistic, last month in the US, the average user on the mobile phone installed 0 new apps. Now, these apps that we have on our phone, we're using an average of 4 hours a day. That is a phenomenal amount of time we're spending on our phones. So where is this time spent? Well, the 80% of this time is spent in the top 5 categories of apps, with over 60% spent in communication and social. This graph alone shows why Facebook has been such a dominant power in the mobile world. It's 60% of time that we spend on our phones today is in communication apps and in social apps. So where exactly are we spending our time? In this next section, I'm going to talk about Turkey and the US on a per category level. And I'm going to present session lengths and the number of sessions. I always like to look at both of these side by side. And the reason for that is some apps have many sessions in a day, but they're short sessions. Think about your chat apps. Other apps have fewer sessions per day, but longer sessions. So when we look at Turkey, in terms of session lengths, games and tools have the longest sessions. Games have almost 20 minutes a session in this country. When we look at the US, just to compare it, games, of course, are popular, but media, entertainment, video apps have a lot of popularity as well. This is probably because bandwidth is a lot easier to access in the US, and mobile video has really taken off in the US, and it's spreading fast. So as you look at the next year, look out for mobile video. It's a growing space, and one where the popularity, once the user tastes it, they want more and more of it. So now let's step back and look at number of sessions. Where do people spend most of their time? This one was surprising to me because in Turkey, we saw that tools have the most number of sessions per day. Calculator apps, translation apps, flashlight-like apps. On the other hand, when we look at the US, the top one is communication. It's chat. Communication is number 2 in Turkey, but that flip was very interesting to me because this was across quite a few million users on the Android platform. So we've talked about where people spend their time. Let's talk about how they leave an app. This is the last set of data that I have for you. So the average app loses 77% of its users in the first 3 days. So I've said this before. I say this again because it's very important. As app developers, many of you spend a lot of time and money to make an app and then to market an app. So what really matters is that first impression, because the user doesn't know how much money you're spending in making or marketing the app. What they know is what they get inside your app. So that first impression is incredibly important, because by day 3, the vast majority of your users are gone. So what happens after that? As you look at the 90th day, the first 90 days of a user, 91% of your users are probably gone. You only retain 9% of your users after the first 3 months. Now, most of these, that means they're not active users. They still have your app on their phone. So you can still send them push notifications if they're opted in. You can still try to entice them to say, hey, come back to our app. We've got something good for you. Not just for anybody, but for you specifically. Because the average user is keeping the app on the phone for 8 months. At that point, they decide, I'm not using this app. Maybe I want to take more photos, more videos, or I'm getting a new phone, so I'm not going to install apps that I'm not using anyway. The last graph I have for you is retention on a per category basis. So the average app loses 77% of its users, but this isn't same across all categories. If you're a news app or a communication app, you actually keep, on average, a higher number of users as you go through the days. So as you look at your teams, your apps, your retention, do compare it to your category, your industry. So to conclude, I'd like to share a thought with you that's obvious to most of us, but we don't talk about it enough. Our mobile phones are with us everywhere we go. They're probably the most personal devices to us, yet the software that runs on them, whether it's the operating system, whether it's the applications, they don't really understand us. But if they did, it could be transformational to each and every one of our businesses, but more importantly, it would be transformational to all the consumers, to all the users in the world. So I want to leave you with the 3 most important takeaways from my talk and my opinion. The first one is to understand your users and their context. Understand why they came into your app. What are they looking for, and how can you help them achieve their goals, whether it's entertainment, whether it's a specific task. Understand their context to communicate with them on an ongoing basis, to give them a warm welcome, but then a warm ongoing experience in your app. The second one is to understand your analytics, not just in a vacuum, not just in a sandbox where you see your up and to the right graph, but you see it in the context of your industry. How are you doing compared to your competitors, compared to your industry, and compared to the mobile ecosystem at large? And the last one, given that this is Brand Week Istanbul, is to reiterate your brand's values every step of the way. Make sure users know that you care about them. You care about every single one of them, that your app isn't just a generic app. It's an app that's been personalized to the user. So with that, this would not have been possible without all of these companies, all of our partners helping us, Apptentive, LeanPlum, Manage.com, Branch, and of course my team at SimilarWeb, my designer, Hope Armstrong, who put this together for us. And thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'll be around for the next 30 to